Well, welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Listen, now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I am so grateful and I'm humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. All right? Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Listen, I've been getting, this is episode 11, I think, and it's only been 10 or 11 episodes, and I've had so much great feedback from you guys, and I've had so many great reviews and comments and stuff. So thank you so much for your support. I'm so happy to hear that it's resonating with you on a deep level, and I'm happy to hear that what I'm sharing is helpful to you. Okay, so listen, without further ado, I want to jump into this because we got a full 50 minutes. Okay, today we are going to be talking about how to win with money. And so we're going to be talking about how to get out of debt, how to create financial peace, financial freedom, and how to be prepared for retirement. So this is way too much to put into one episode. So we're gonna make this a two-part series, okay? So the first episode today is gonna be how to get out of debt and strategies in order to do that. If you have consumer debt, if you've got credit card debt, student loans, car payments, all those different things. And the second episode, the first episode's basically a defensive strategy, and the second episode is going to be all about once you've paid off your debt, I'm going to be teaching you how to save and how to invest, how much you need to save, where are great, sustainable, practical places that you can invest, and how much you need to save and invest in order to be prepared for retirement, okay? There's a ton of information in these next two episodes. But today we're going to be talking about the defensive strategy, how to get out of debt if you have consumer debt and become financially stable and secure financial peace. Okay, so why am I talking about this? It's because money can be so confusing. All right, money problems can break our spirits as men. They can tear apart marriages, and they can rob us of the futures that we've always wanted. Also, millions of people stress about money. And my wife and I were another statistic. We were two of those millions of people who stressed about money, especially in the first few years of our marriage. I had significant student loans, and we had some consumer debt, and we just could not seem to get ahead. I was working 3 part-time jobs. She was working while she was going to school, and it was just a difficult time for us. We had fights about money. Often we had challenges that we had to overcome. And I remember a pivotal point in our journey when we were in the kitchen, and we were kind of having an argument about something that we wanted to do, but we couldn't pay for it. We couldn't afford to do it. And I just said, hey, we are broke. In fact, we're worse than broke. We're like negative thousands of dollars. And it was this visceral moment of realization for me where, like, not only do we not have money, we have negative money. So, and it hit me for the first time. This was a real turning point in our lives. So I started studying personal finance every spare minute I could. I started consuming tons of personal finance books, many of which I'm going to list at the end of this episode. By the way, I'm going to give you a list of the top books that I've read that have been super helpful for me. We made a plan. We followed through. We paid off the debt. And I can honestly say that I cannot remember the last time we had a fight about our finances, because it's given us financial peace that I can't even fully explain to you. It's brought about more unity and peace in our marriage than we ever thought was possible. And so in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through what we did and how I've coached others on this path to financial peace. But if you're listening to this and you're feeling like you're alone in this struggle, or maybe this is a burden that you carry, I want you to listen to these statistics, okay? The American Psychological Association's latest survey on stress in America found that 72% of Americans reported feeling stressed about money at least sometime in the prior month. And according to a Mind Over Money survey by Capital One, more than 3 in 4 Americans, which is 77%, report feeling anxious about their financial situation. Financial worries include a broad range of issues from savings and retirement to affording a house or a child's education. Here's some interesting statistics. 58% of Americans say that they feel that finances control their lives. 52% of Americans have difficulty controlling their money-related worries. And they're worried about their financial future. For example, 68% of those surveyed fear that they don't have enough money for retirement. 56% have a fear of keeping up with the cost of living. And 45% have a fear of that they won't be able to manage their debt levels. And the impact that the financial stress has on Americans stretches into all aspects of life, with these respondents from these surveys saying that 43% say that they feel fatigued, 42% find it difficult to concentrate at work, and 41% that they say that they have difficulty sleeping. 25% of all respondents said that financial stress affects their relationships. So what does this say? This says this is a significant issue that we need to talk about, right? This is worth talking about, and it's a big problem because it can be so confusing as well, right? The topic of finances are no different than fitness or in our marriages, in the sense that there's hundreds of thousands of influencers, on social media platform that are out there saying that they have the right way, to get rich or to get in shape or have the best marriage. And everywhere you look, there's contradicting advice. Everywhere you turn, whether it's in fitness or relationships or in finances. For example, do you do it by investing in Bitcoin or NFTs or, RRSPs or Roth IRAs and, all these different things? Do you become a day trader? Like there's so many different things that people talk about. And it feels like everyone else is doing better than you in life because we're constantly comparing our story to everyone else's highlight reel. And so this whole process for transformation and change in your finances or your fitness or your marriage can seem really overwhelming. So no wonder the topic of finances can be so riddled with emotions like fear and anxiety and hopelessness. But today I'm going to teach you the foundations, the basics, so that you can find the best path for you, because every couple has their own unique situations, right? So for example, some have high income and high expenses. Some have low income, but they have low expenses. Others have low income, but high expenses. And some people, the lucky ones, have high income and low expenses, right? But regardless of your situation, if you have a bank account and you've got a brain and a wife, you've likely had conflict or questions around money, all right? So let's get into it today. Grab a pen, grab your phone, take some notes, all right? Or save this episode, download this episode, bookmark this episode, whatever you got to do, because you're going to want to come back to this. Because we're going to get real practical, okay? So why is financial literacy so important? Why is it so important that we know and understand money? Well, it's important for a few reasons, because being confident in your finances and making wise choices make the rest of your life easier. You'll have less fights with your wife, your kids will be set up for success, and lastly, you'll be able to create that dream future that you wanted, that you'll be able to retire comfortably and be able to really soak in those golden years when you quit working. So why is financial literacy important in marriage? Well, listen to this. Financial problems are one of the leading causes of divorce in America. Millions of people are struggling with being overwhelmed with debt, but very few people are talking about it because it's a dirty secret for most people. You see, there's a lot of shame associated with carrying a bunch of debt. People don't like talking about it, especially men, because we feel this pressure, this need to provide, and if we're not doing a great job at that, we become riddled with insecurity. RamseySolutions.com displays some fantastic data on the average debt that each household carries and breaks it down into categories. And if you're watching on YouTube, I've got this table displayed on the screen, but I'll read it out to you for those of you listening, okay? Per household, okay, the average household carries about $14,241 of credit card debt. Per household, the average American home carries about $58,112 in student loan debt. The average household carries $31,142 of debt in auto loans. And in this chart, they combine all the household debt to make the statement that the average debt per household is $158,200 $209. So over 158 grand per house. That's the average American household that carries in debt. That is wild. Okay, now some of that is mortgage debt, right? But a lot of it, credit card debt, student loans, car payments, all that kind of stuff. But here's what's interesting to me that stands out the most. The average American carries over $14,000 of credit card debt. Okay, if your average credit card debt stands at 19% interest, if you don't pay that off, you're adding $225 every month simply in interest. So using the power of compounding interest when it's not working in your favor and having an initial credit card debt of $14,000 at 19% interest, if you just paid the minimum payments, which basically just covered your interest, after 3 years, your $14,000 would be over $25,000. You see, debt is a slippery slope because the further you go, the more hopeless you feel. This feeling of being a failure leads to insecurity and leads to frustration, tension in your marriage, and stress. I've seen it over and over again in other guys, and I felt it myself. Now, why is financial literacy important for your kids? Well, the number one big issue here is that it's not taught in schools. This was one of the biggest things. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki talks a lot about this in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is like a timeless classic of a finance book. If you've never read a book on money, read that book first. But they're not taught about financial literacy. They're not taught about how to manage the money, how to operate with a budget. And unless you were one of the few people who were lucky to be taught by your parents, you grew up with no knowledge of how to handle money. And this is really unfortunate. And we've been set up for failure. I want you to think about this. In the US, the legal drinking age is 21, okay? So while the government says that at 18 years old, you aren't responsible enough to drink a beer, they have no problem forking out $60,000 to $100,000 for student loans to any 18 to 21-year-old with no foreseeable plan on how and when to pay it back. Tell me how this makes sense. I mean, help this make sense to me because it doesn't. Here's the other part is then these guys graduate and they take that debt into marriage and they add more debt with a credit card and a mortgage. And so the cycle continues. And we wonder why we're 35 years old and drowning in debt with no plan, no financial understanding of how to deal with it. So it's important to talk about. And lastly, why is financial literacy important for your future? Because there's a lot of people who are not prepared for retirement. I want you to think about this. The average lifespan of a Canadian, for example, is 82.6 years old, okay? Now, if the average person retires around 65 years old, that means that they have to live for 17.6 years with no income outside of old age security, social services, whatever it is in your country you're living in. But put that in the context of, say, if you're 35 years old, that would be like, if you're 35, you'd have to live to be 53 with no job, with no income, which is outrageous. That's a long time. So it's really important to save appropriately for your future. Here's some more sobering statistics. The national average for retirement savings varies depending on age, but according to the Economic Policy Institute, the median retirement savings for all working age households in the U.S. is around $95,776. Now, this figure includes both employer-sponsored retirement accounts and individual retirement accounts like IRAs. Now, to really put this into context, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor, the average U.S. annual salary in Q4 of 2023 was $59,384. The average savings of somebody by the time they retire is 95 grand. The average salary is 60 grand. I mean, people don't even have 2 years of a salary saved. So how are you going to live for like 20 years on that? So I hope you're seeing the importance of this topic. And if you are in a situation where you have a bunch of debt and you're not in a position where you can begin to save or invest, I hope that you're seeing the importance of this. And another challenging part is money just gets a big grip on people and we let it control us. Right? But the reality is money is simply a tool that we must learn how to use. There is no emotional component to money. It's simply, money is a language that we need to learn how to speak. And today, I want to help you, at least give you some basic tools to help you understand how to speak that language, how to get control of your money and make it work for you instead of you constantly working for it. Think about it this way. If you learn how to put your money to work for you, it can work all night long, all day, every day, and continue to grow. but you can't do that, right? You need time off to sleep, to spend with your family. So how much you can grow your money is very limited, of course, because you're being, for the most part, we're paid hourly. So you need to learn how to put your money to work for you, which we're going to get into, especially in part 2 of this series. So I'm going to teach you how to treat money like the tool that it is and was intended to be. Okay, so let's dive into this. But before we do, I want to just put out a very clear disclaimer. I want to state clearly that I am not a licensed financial advisor, and anything that you hear on this podcast episode, anything that I say is not to be considered financial advice. All right, it's simply my opinion. And while I'm sharing my knowledge and my experience, I will not be held liable for the results of any financial decisions made after hearing this podcast. I'm sharing our story and that the tools that worked for us, and I'm compiled it into a series of steps. You can choose to do with that what you will. Sound good? So as we jump into this, there are 2 basic principles that everybody needs to understand to get ahead with money, okay? At the highest and its most simple level, there are 2 major levers you can pull when it comes to getting out of debt and seeing financial success. Number 1, decrease your expenses, and number 2, increase your income, okay? Decrease your expenses, increase your income. And just like as we've learned in other episodes about fitness and, losing weight, different things, the simple concept is that if you want to lose weight, you need to decrease the calories you intake and increase the calories that you burn. And of course, just like in fitness, there's more to it than that. There's more nuance to that. But at the highest level, this is it, okay? And in some cases, they can be an either or both and. So for example, maybe you don't cut down your expenses, but you come into a large sum of money, maybe a large inheritance, or you sell a business, and all of a sudden that allows you to pay down your debt, which is awesome. Good for you. Or maybe you're here and you don't increase your income, but you learn to live frugally and reduce your expenses. So that way, most of your money is going to savings and investments, and you can grow your wealth this way. But in every situation, these are the 2 factors that are most important to consider. And so when it feels like you're getting kind of into the weeds and it gets confusing, I want to just strip it back to that. How am I decreasing my expenses? How am I increasing my income? And like I said, today is going to be about how to play defense. And the next episode is going to be offense. All right. So let's go. All right. I'm going to tell you about your 6 steps to getting control of your money and getting out of debt. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do before we jump into these 6 steps is simply an audit of where you are, right? Because you cannot manage what you don't measure. You can't manage what you don't measure. Okay. And in order to know where you need to go, you need to know where you're starting. All right, so we're going to do a little quick financial assessment, okay? I want you to write down these questions or at least think about them while we're talking about them. Number 1, how much debt do you have, okay? And that consumer debt could be student loans, credit card debts, anything that's financed, like a car payment, any kind of debt that you have. Second question is, what are your assets? Your assets are something that's worth money, right? So for example, do you have any investments, RSPs or IRAs if you're listening from the States, or TFSAs or Roth IRAs from the States, or other investments, or even cars? Like what is the book value on the cars that you have? What's your home worth? Do you have any home equity? Do you have any high value personal possessions, right? Like really expensive jewelry or whatever the case is, anything that you could sell for a certain amount of money. And I want you to combine all that and add up what your assets are versus your debts, okay? And the next question is, how are you currently preparing for retirement? Do you regularly invest into a pension plan or a savings account? And if you don't, why not? I mean, let's talk about it, okay? Another question is, how are you preparing a future for your children? In Canada, we have something called an RESP, which is a registered education savings plan. This is a pretty great tool that you should be using if you're a Canadian parent for your children. But in the States, they have an equivalent thing called the 529 plan. So consider that. Next question, when you consider your assets, with your minus your liabilities, what is your net worth right now? Do you know what that is? I mean, it'd be interesting to calculate it. This was an eye-opener for me when I calculated our net worth when we were in debt. It was a big eye-opener. And another question is, what are some financial goals you have? And are they realistic? Right? A lot of us just imagine that one day we will retire, but we don't have an active plan or an achievable plan on how to get there. And before you know it, time passes by and boom, we're 60 years old or even 55 years old. And now we're starting to think about retirement, and it's getting very, very close. You do not want to find yourself in that situation. Okay, this is why we're talking about it today. The last question is, if you die tomorrow, if you're listening to me and you're a father and you're a husband, the question is, if you die tomorrow, what kind of financial position would you be leaving your family in? That's an uncomfortable question, but it's an important one. And it's one that we all have to ask ourselves. All right, so now that we've done this financial audit, this assessment of where we're at, now let's get into it. The money game, right? How do you learn how to play defense? And why do I call this financial defense? Well, dictionary.com defines defense as a resistance against attack or protection. Collins Dictionary defines it as defense is action that is taken to protect someone or something against attack. And I love that, right? If you had a hockey team that only knew how to play offense, it would be fine until the opposing offense decides to rush the net. Right? If you build a giant castle, but you don't build any walls to protect it, it's all sunshine and rainbows until an army comes against you. So being able to play financial defense means that you are out of debt completely, that you have an emergency fund or cash savings in the case of any emergency. And continuing with this analogy, you may be managing your debt just fine until an attack comes. So for example, if you have no savings and you're already in debt and you lose the engine in the main vehicle that you have for your family, this is going to be a crisis, right? Because the first question becomes, how do I pay for this? Well, the only option you have is to take out more debt, to take out a loan, max out the credit card, take out a line of credit. But if you're free of consumer debt and you have an emergency fund, this crisis is simply just an inconvenience. And as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a leader, it's important to protect yourself against this financial attack. It's vital that you are prepared for this battle and you're ready to weather any storm. And as I'm sure you've experienced already, marriage and parenting is stressful enough. You do not need to add more financial stress to make your life even more difficult. So let's get into it. Okay. Hey, I promise we're going to get back to this episode, but I just wanted to take a few seconds to tell you about a free marriage course that I'm offering, no charge, and it's called Remodel Your Marriage. And it's a 4-step blueprint to understanding your wife, keeping your cool, and getting the fire back in your marriage. And in this course, we're going to dig into the 4 foundations that every successful couple understands well. And that's number 1, how to love each other well. Number 2, how to feel and how to communicate how you feel, how to communicate through conflict. Number 3 is how to fight fair and how to fight well. And then number 4 is how to have fun and to break out of that routine of becoming just really great roommates. And so if you're watching this and maybe you would say that your marriage is feeling a little stale, maybe needs a little remodeling or refreshing, all you need to do is head to dadnationco.com/remodel for that free course for you, my friend. I put a lot of time and energy into it, and I believe that it can help you transform your marriage. I believe in the marriage model. I believe in you and your marriage, my friend. All right, let's get back to the episode. The first move on this journey is to choose your battle, okay? So I want you to look at all of your expenses and ask yourself, is this a need or is this a want? What are you paying for in your life and how much of it is actually a need? And if you're listening to this and you do have a bunch of consumer debt, the only things that are a need for you should be your 4 pillars, all right? Food, clothing, shelter, transportation. When I say transportation, I mean not a new car, just simply the ability to commute from point A to point B, okay? Then I want you to make a list of all your expenses. And then you will eliminate any wants and focus almost completely on lowering your expenses. So if you're wondering, I'm going to give you a list of wants versus a list of needs. Okay, wants are a new iPhone. Your phone doesn't have to be a new iPhone. It could be any phone. a new car, going out for dinner regularly, subscription services like Hulu, Netflix, Prime, Disney Plus, etc. Coffee's on the way to work. That's $6 Starbucks every morning. It's not helping. Club memberships, gym memberships, things like that. A list of needs, however, is your mortgage or your rent, right? Your shelter, your utilities, groceries, clothing, not designer clothes, medications, transportation, that could be public transit. It could be a used car. These things are needs. So then you're going to take that list of needs and you're going to calculate how much they cost you every single month. And you're just going to keep that number aside for a second. But before moving on to the next section, I really want you to pause and be honest with yourself, because cheating or hiding things does nothing but rob you and your family in the long run. Okay, so what wants are you paying for? Then you might want to consider cutting them out. And then what needs are you paying for? And take a look at those and see, how can I reduce those, right? Okay, so after number one that you've chosen your battle, number two is going to be how to identify your enemies. Make a total of all your debts, okay? And so here are some examples of common debts that people carry. Like I said earlier, credit card debt, student loan debt, anything to collections agency, auto financing, your mortgage, consolidated debts, lines of credit, any debt that you have with family or friends. And make a list of your total debts and what they cost you to maintain each month. What is the minimum payment I would need to just simply pay off all these, or pay all of these debts per month? Now you're going to list your monthly income, then you're going to subtract your monthly expenses, and then you're going to subtract your monthly mandatory debt payments, the minimum payments, and then you're going to take whatever's left over. You're going to take that. I want you to take that number and write it down, because this is the amount that you're going to play with every single month. Now let's move on to number three, which is draft your battle plan. Okay. So you're going to list all your debts from largest to smallest, and also make note of their interest rates from highest to lowest. And then you just need to decide on what you're going to tackle first. And each way you do this could have different benefits, right? So we used Dave Ramsey's snowball method. And so what we did was we tackled the smallest debts first. And there's really two ways you could do this. You could look at your smallest debts and pay those off first, or you could pay off your largest debts with the highest interest rates first. And the difference between the two really is, by paying off the smallest debts first, there is a huge psychological benefit. Because if you're listening to this and you think that you would have a difficult time staying motivated and focused, try paying off those debts in order from smallest to largest, because this is going to give you more wins, right? It's going to give you a boost in confidence, and it's going to motivate you to keep going. Now, this process might be marginally slower, but if it's between you doing it slowly or not doing it at all, then this is the way to do it. Now, if you're listening to this and you have no problem staying focused and motivated, you could try paying off the debts with the highest interest rates or the largest sums, because there is a marginal financial benefit from that as well. However, keep in mind that if it's a large debt, it will feel overwhelming, and you may feel like this is hopeless and you're not making much progress. So be self-aware enough to recognize what the best option is for you. The important thing to remember is that there are several ways to do this. And rather than focusing on what's most efficient and effective financially, it's more important to focus on what's going to keep you motivated to actually do it. You have to ask yourself, what approach is the most sustainable and what will result in you actually accomplishing your goals? Just like in the fitness world, right? It's not about finding the absolute best workouts for muscle gain or weight loss. It's about finding the most sustainable approach that will keep you focused to achieve your goal. It's like consistency beats intensity every single time in every area of life. So the exercise here is to organize your debts in order in which you will pay them off, whether it's smallest to largest or highest interest rate to lowest, whatever it is that you want to do, but list the debts in order, okay? Mark that down, the order, and then park it for now, okay? Let's move on to the fourth step. Now, this fourth step has two parts, okay? So 4A is to defend your home base, okay? So this next step is to save an emergency fund of $1,000 to $3,000. And I know what you're thinking. this isn't enough to have saved in the bank. And you're not wrong, but it's intentionally designed that way because that amount of money will alleviate any significant pressure, but it's not meant to just give you financial peace. It's not meant to be your long-term savings plan. This is just a little cash to take some pressure off. And I say some because it's good to leave a certain amount of pressure on to help you stay motivated to get this debt paid off. It's like keeping a fire lit underneath you. It's keeping this sense of urgency within you until you take this battle to completion. You'll be amazed at how much peace it will bring you to simply have $2,000 of untouched cash in your bank account just in case of an emergency. But you'll also notice that you won't totally feel secure or settled. Now you might be asking, okay, well, if I save that money, what am I going to be doing with my debt? But right now, what you need to do is simply just pay the minimum payments on all your debts and save that first emergency fund as fast as possible. And when that's in place, then you're going to take that battle plan and you're going to go to war against your debt, okay? So what's the exercise here? You pause all extra spending and you pay only minimum payments on your debt. Like I said, you put everything you can into your emergency fund. And once you have this funded, then you move on. And the second part of step 4, which is optional, is what I call to expand your armory. Now, if you have margin to do so, it would be wise to look for ways to increase your income to pay down your debt faster. It's a good idea to consider what you and your wife can do to increase your income for a season. Again, only if there's margin. You can pick up a side hustle to create more cash flow. Everything helps in this season. And again, this isn't necessary, but it would speed up the process significantly. So for example, when we were paying off our debt years ago, I taught voice lessons and guitar lessons. Sam picked up casual shifts at a clinic on her days off so that we could throw all that money at our debt. But remember, don't do this at the cost of your emotional, your relational, your mental health, because it won't be fun to get out of debt and then be getting into a divorce, okay? Your first priority is your home base, which is your family. That's why this step 4B is optional. But here are some examples of some quick and easy side hustles, right? You could pick up a job driving for Uber, for DoorDash, skip the dishes, or you could monetize a skill that you already have, like teaching or tutoring, woodworking, repairing, or performing, whatever the case is. You can pick up dog walking, or teaching ESL classes, or if you're big on social media, you can do social media management or design or marketing if that's your skill set. Actually, Ramsey Solutions released an article in 2023, which is 27 different side hustle ideas. And I'm going to post that in the show notes below. So if you want to know about some great side hustles, hit that link for some inspiration. Okay. So after you've done that, we're going to move on to step number 5, which is take back your land. Okay. This is when you go to battle against your debt. You're going to take any disposable income and you're going to throw it at any consumer debt you have to take care of it once and for all. So what does this look like? Well, let me give you some practical examples of how you can reroute your money to attack your consumer debt. You're not going to like this, all right? This is not going to be comfortable to listen to. But that bougie trip to Spain this year, it maybe has to become a low-key camping trip that's an hour outside the city, right? Those high-end dinners you go out for on date nights, maybe that's just cooking at home together. Or like I said, that morning, Starbucks for $6 is going to be brewed coffee from home for 50 cents. Or maybe it means you got to sell that BMW that has that $600 a month car payment and reduce that car payment to 0 because now you're driving a 6-year-old Toyota Corolla. And while we're talking about it, I'm a car guy. I love cars, okay? I think about them, I see them, I dream about them. But listen, cars are overpriced metal boxes simply designed to get us from point A to point B. And these metal boxes go down in value the more we drive them. So there is absolutely no need to put yourself in greater debt just simply to have one car that is shaped or colored differently than the other. Think about it this way. Is it worth jeopardizing your family's future or security to have a faster metal box than your neighbor? I don't think so when you put it that way. You see, there's no glory without struggle or pain. And in my experience, this is the hardest move of every position in playing the game of money. It's the most difficult, but it's also the most rewarding. This is where you learn and live by the process of delayed gratification. In this part of the game, you have to constantly ask yourself, will this purchase get me to my goal? Is this a want or a need? And 98% of the time, you don't need that thing. There was a saying that I heard a while ago that I just love. Is broke people stay broke by living like they're rich. But the rich people stay rich by living like they're broke. All right? I also love this quote, that poor people spend money they don't have buying things they don't need to impress people they don't like. Men especially can feel insecure about the life that they've provided for their families. So what do? We spend money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Ultimately, to feel better about ourselves and to temporarily shove off that sting. But it comes back, and it will always come back until we deal with it forever. So what do you need to start doing? We need to start acting our wage, okay? Because some people are out here making 50 grand a year, but living like they're making 500 grand a year, all while driving themselves into a deeper pit of debt. So the exercise here is to simply pay off all of your consumer debt. You're going to throw everything at it and get rid of this financial pain. Now, why is this important? Because your earning power will be unlocked when you free up those monthly debt payments. Because now you can reroute all of that money to your investments and to saving. This is going to speed up your journey to wealth exponentially. And how does that work? I'm going to use some simple calculations to help you understand exactly what I mean. Okay, so let's take, for example, your car payment. The average car payment in the States is $716 per month. The average payment an American makes to their credit cards per month is $430. Mortgage payments are on average about $2,012 per month. The average student loan payment in the States is $393 per month. So if you take out the mortgage, this creates a total debt payment of $1,539 per month, which is crazy, you guys. But now let's think about it this way. If at 35 years old, you were debt-free and chose to take that monthly debt payment of $1,539 and invest it into ETFs, index funds, or whatever, your monthly contribution would result in a total of $1.48 million at the point of your retirement at 65 years old. That's assuming that you started contributions at 35 years old with a very reasonable, realistic return of 8% on average over the course of 30 years. That means that if you started at the age of 35 even, the same money that had you crippled, living from paycheck to paycheck, if you freed it up, could be used to make you a millionaire by retirement. Are you starting to see the power in this? It's pretty incredible. So a fun exercise for you as you're starting this journey of paying off your debt, I want you to go to the local craft store, pick up a giant piece of poster board, and I want you to pick up some big colored markers and make a giant debt thermometer with the amounts that you have to pay off, okay? I want you to hang it on a wall in your office or your bedroom or wherever you're going to see it regularly. And then at the end of every month, when you're doing your budget and you've calculated how much you've paid off, I want you to grab a big red marker with your wife, and you can even include your kids into this too, and you're going to color in that section on the thermometer that you were able to pay off that month. And if you think that sounds juvenile, let me remind you that this was one of the things that me and my wife looked forward to the most at the end of every month. It was so inspiring and encouraging. Why? Because we could immediately see our progress with our own eyes, and we were physically involved with our hands. And it was such a cool moment every single month, and it motivated us. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Paying off debt can feel pointless when you're just staring at black and white digits on a spreadsheet. If you're a creative guy like me, this is going to help you stay motivated. You see, so often when it comes to paying off debt, people think of one side of the equation, which is simply getting out of debt. And they think that's too hard or it's not worth it. But you see, the other part of the equation is what happens to your money when you apply the magic of compounding interest as you invest. And we're going to have that conversation in part 2 of this little series. Sound good? All right, we're going to move on to number 6, which is the last step, and this is to fortify your walls, okay? And this is where you save your emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. Now, the Cambridge Dictionary defines the word fortify this way, is to make something stronger, especially in order to protect it. This is exactly what saving your emergency does for your family. It makes your family financially stronger and more prepared in order to protect against potential crisis that may come up. That way, if you lose your job suddenly, you've got a buffer. If your car blows up, you've got no worries. And my friend, I have been there. And it's an incredible feeling when you can just pay for something up front and not have to go into debt for it. Because realistically, most people are just living the paycheck to paycheck. According to a study by Payments and the Lending Club, a whopping 64.4% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. You know what's the most scary part about that reality? Is that when you're living paycheck to paycheck, your employer has complete control over you. Because if you don't get paid on that payday, you are instantly in crisis mode. Using this statistic, 2 out of 3 Americans are enslaved to their employers. If they were to get fired, they would be in serious financial trouble within 2 weeks. So what happens is we get stuck. We're bound by these golden handcuffs. In his book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, he writes this about the importance of saving for the sake of saving. And he talks about the fact that we have to have reserves and we have to be prepared for anything. He writes this, a good rule of thumb for a lot of things in life is that everything that can break will eventually break. So if many things rely on one thing working and that thing breaks, you are counting the days to catastrophe. That's called a single point of failure. Some people are remarkably good at avoiding single points of failure. Most critical systems on airplanes have backups, and then the backups often have backups. For example, modern jets have 4 redundant electrical systems. You can fly with one engine and technically land with none, as every jet must be capable of stopping on a runway with its brakes alone without the thrust reversed from its engines. Suspension bridges can similarly lose many of their cables without falling. The biggest point of failure with money is a sole reliance on a paycheck to fund short-term spending needs with no savings to create a gap between what you think your expenses are and what they might be in the future. Friends, this is no way to live. Living in perpetual fear of potential crisis that's looming around any corner is not fun. So you got to fortify your walls and complete number 6. All right. And then here's how you do this. So you've saved your first emergency fund of $1,000 to $3,000. Then you've organized your debt. You've paid off all of your debt. And now the great thing is you already have, $1,000 to $3,000 already in the bank. You're so close. You're going to continue to keep all your extra spending on hold until you get this new emergency plan in place. And like I said, the good news is that this won't take long because your income is freed up now and is no longer tied up in debt payments. So you have so much more income power to save this amount of money. So what you need to do is calculate your monthly expenses. Again, this isn't extra spending or allowances. This is straight up cost of living. So for example, let's just say it's $4,000 per month. Okay, now you're going to take that cost of living and you're going to multiply it by 3 months to 6 months, okay? Now, for people with very consistent and reliable jobs with less risk and consistent pay, you may be safer to shoot for the 3 to 4 months. But for people with sporadic income and a less stable industry, you're better off to save for that 5 to 6 month range. It's also important to consider your threshold for security, right? Your peace of mind. Because if you'll only feel peace of mind with 6 months of savings, then do that. Whatever it takes to bring you financial peace. So here's an example. If your monthly expenses equate to $4,000, then if you have to have an emergency fund of 3 months, then your savings, cash savings in the bank should be a minimum of $12,000 ready at your disposal. So for example, people in government jobs, teachers, healthcare workers, etc., these kinds of people have a little bit more stable positions. So maybe you're safer with that amount. But if you're self-employed or you're in an inconsistent industry or not as stable of an industry, you're going to want to aim, like I said, from 5 to 6 months, which equates to about $24,000. That's 6 months of savings. That's how much you should be having in your savings account ready for your disposal in case something goes wrong. And if you're listening to this, that number might sound a little bit scary, and that's okay. Don't let that scare you off, all right? Because I've given you a very clear system. But remember, when you get to this point, you've got a massive monthly amount that you have been previously paying down debt. Now that's all freed up to fully fund your emergency fund. All right, there you have it. Now, when you get this plan in place and when you do these things, you will be experiencing what we call financial peace. The stress is going to be alleviated because the pressure's off. By now, you will have done the following. Number 1, chosen your battle. You've identified and decided on what your wants and needs are. Number 2, you've identified the enemy. You have identified all consumer debts you currently have. Number 3, you've drafted your battle plan. You've listed your debts from highest priority to the lowest. Number 4A is you've defended your home base, which means you've saved $1,000 to $3,000 to protect you in case of an emergency. Number 4B, which is the optional step, you've expanded your armory, which means you've created an additional stream of income to speed up the process. Step number 5, you've taken back your land, all right? You've paid off all your consumer debt. What you have is now yours and cannot be taken away. And number 6, the last step, is you fortified your walls, which means you now have a fully funded emergency fund and you've strengthened your finances and protected your family against any financial attack. And now, with no debt and your emergency fund in place, you can take that additional income and use it to pay off your mortgage or start saving and investing for retirement, which we're going to get into in a lot of detail in part 2, as I've been saying. Fewer than 25% of American households are debt-free. So congratulations, if you do this, you are a very rare breed. In this context, being the odd person out is a fantastic thing. Famous life coach Rich Litvin says this: be weird, not wide. In other words, don't follow the crowd. Dave Ramsey says debt is normal, be weird. All right, this is a great path to carve out for yourself. And when you're on this journey, don't expect people to understand. In fact, most people will not understand. They'll look at you like you're crazy because everyone has a car payment or everyone has debt or student loans aren't real debt. I mean, I've heard it all. I mean, people have said it to us as well when we were on this journey. But what you need to understand is that these people are saying these things to justify their own poor financial decisions and using it to fabricate a false sense of peace about where they are at financially, or maybe they just don't know. Maybe they're just completely oblivious to the importance of this. And now you can use what you've learned to help them. But don't fall for that trap. Don't let those your friends or your family discourage you on this journey, because you have just exponentially increased your ability to save, to invest, and to be at peace financially, and to create a future that you could otherwise only have dreamed of. And now this is where the real fun begins, because you've got this strong, impenetrable defense. You've built a strong home base, you've taken back your land, and now we're going to learn how to go to the offense and master this game of money once and for all. And just like every other week, I've got some questions for you to consider, okay? Out of all these steps you've learned about how to play defense with your money, which ones do you struggle with most? And are you doing any of these steps right now? Maybe they're out of order. What does that look like for you? And as you listen to all these steps that are in the plan, which one resonates with you the most? And lastly, what steps do you need to take action on today? So if you're carrying a bunch of debt, after you finish this episode, I want you to have a conversation with your wife about what it's going to look like for you to start taking action now. It's imperative that you and your spouse be on the same page about where you want to be financially, because this journey is so much harder if you're doing it alone in a marriage. One of the things I'm most thankful for in my marriage is the fact that my wife and I are on the same page, that we've always been on the same page, that we share the same values financially, that we've always been passionate about seeing the same results. And it's brought about, like I said, it's brought about so much unity in our marriage. And I know that as we wrap up this episode, you're probably thinking, man, he just dumped a lot of information on me. And I don't want to overwhelm you with this. I want to give you some takeaways. So I'm going to post a link to the notes from this episode, like actually what I've said to you today, that Word doc, I'm going to post it for you to be able to download so you can take this plan and work through it yourself. All right. The notes don't look pretty, but it'll be what it'll be, and it's going to help you. Okay. If you are in debt and you need to get out of debt, please download these notes and start working these steps. And also, I'm going to give you a list of my favorite books on personal finance for you to consider reading. And I've really just taken all these steps from these different authors, Ramit Sethi, Dave Ramsey, Morgan Housel, so many other guys, Tony Robbins, and I've combined them, distilled them down to these steps, and they've tremendously helped me. But these books are going to help inspire you as well. And if you're finishing up this episode and you're thinking, well, we're already out of debt, I mean, this has been good information, I want you to tune into part 2 of this series, which is going to be in a couple of weeks from now, because we're going to be talking about how to play offense in the game of money mastery, like I said. And in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the following things. I'm going to help you demystify all these common terms that can be so confusing, like 401k, GICs, mutual funds, TFSAs, and so many more things, right? We're going to be talking about how much money you need to be saving and investing monthly to retire well. We're also going to be talking about what I call your financial 4, which is the 4 areas that every man needs to be investing in. And lastly, I'm going to give you a bunch of financial principles that will help guide you on your journey to financial peace and financial security, okay? And if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to hear from you. Surprise, surprise, okay? Tell me, what was your big takeaway? What was the big win from this episode? What was that aha moment, that eureka moment where you're like, that's it, okay? Also, if you're listening to this on audio, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever the case is, consider jumping over to YouTube and subscribing to my channel if you don't mind. It'll take you like 30 seconds, but it would be a huge help to me. It would boost the show and the algorithm, because everyone loves the old algorithm. All right. I want to hear from you. Why? Because I want to walk with you. I want to support you any way that I can. And if you watch this and you still have more questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media. My handle is on Instagram. It's @DadNationCo. Okay. My email is mitchell@dadnationco.com. I'm here to serve you any way that I can. And if anything that I've learned on my journey can help you and support you, then that's a huge win for me, as much as it is a win for you. Okay. So that's all for me this week. Hey, we have some incredible guests coming up. I can't tell you who they are, but I am so pumped. These are people that I've followed for like a couple of years now, and they are major players in the space of personal development and fatherhood and parenting. And over the next probably 6 weeks, you're going to see some interviews coming out. And I can't wait to have these conversations with them and to give them to you. I know you're going to learn a ton. So I don't mean to tease you, but it's going to be good. Okay, so be sure, like I said, to subscribe or follow the show, download them. You're not going to want to miss what's coming up, okay? Listen, I'm here for you. I'm in your corner, okay? I believe in you. I believe in your marriage. Let's get after it. Have an incredible week. Talk soon.